go. All right, thank you all for coming. Hope you enjoyed lunch. What we're going to run through today is a look at a little bit of work we've done and a lot of work that's upcoming, sort of like our plans and roadmaps for the second half of this year coming into next year. And it's all around where we are in automated quality internally and how we get that process and that confidence and those toolings usable, available, and displaying their value out to all of you so that it can be a collaborative process where we're building tools internally and we're exposing them in a way that can, help our extension developers primarily. Primarily, the focus is going to be on how that's going to run into our marketplace efforts for extension development and submission, how that gets onto storefront, how we, ensure quality is there. It's up to our standards, that we've shared those standards, and then that we can use that as a factor in marketplace with, quality baked in and visible to merchants and SIs about what these extensions are, how they've been tested, and what you can rely on from that process. So, this is me. I am, in fact, the quality lead in community engineering. Before that, if any of you have seen me before, it's been talking about MFTF. That was kind of my baby for about a year there. That's out and live now, and we are using that a lot internally and pushing it out. But what we want to do is take that piece of tooling we've done, and this is going to be similar to a lot of things we've done, is take some tooling we've done that we're proud of, that we think fulfills its purpose, and does some good work that we want it to do, but then make it much more real world. Plug it into our existing ecosystem and have it connected from start to finish to show this is why we should be using these tools, this is exactly what we are, how we came to the decisions we came to, and what actual real world effect making that investment in quality is going to have on the storefront for extension developers selling their extensions, and for SIs and merchants taking those extensions, what kind of confidence they can have because of the transparency in this quality process. So I'm going to start initially talking about MFTF. For those of you who use it, this should be useful. For those of you who don't, we'll give you an idea of how we are rolling that out and what that improvement in quality is. So essentially, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's a new functional testing framework. It replaces the old MTF. But essentially what we're doing with this is not just building a tooling framework, but putting a lot of focus on this functional testing. And that's front-end browser-based testing. So historically, we've had a lot of unit and integration testing, technical developer-focused testing, which has its use and is valuable and continues to live in the product. But we now want to take that user-centric and user-driven approach to quality to be our finest and highest bar of quality. That as delivered, this works for the business and for the customers, and that's going to be sort of our golden standard. It's going to be beyond the unit and integration, all other types of testing. This is sort of the quality focus we are focusing on internally, and we're going to take that focus and push it into the marketplace side of things as well, so that all of these extensions that are going to live up in marketplace, as we roll out these processes and toolings and infrastructure, can also have that focus on this is all about the customer experience. This is all about it working in live systems with the greatest amount of confidence you can have in that process as possible. In terms of the MFTF then, we're now pushing stuff under app code. Previously, it was sort of living in the traditional testing place under dev. We've pushed these under a modular structure, and this is going to support modularity, inclusion and exclusion of testing depending on your configurations. Essentially, what this allows us to do is to have, several people talked earlier in the technical track around extensions, minimizing extensions, but the reality is most merchants are going to have a lot of extensions installed. 6 would be a small number. So we want this to be as modular as possible, so as we're dropping extensions in, trying them out, or trying upgrades with extensions installed, we can have the correct versions of functional tests that can drop in with those extensions and merge into and run a full regression test set alongside Magento Core. So it allows us to have this idea of tests are as modular as extensions, and we can drop them in where we need, we can take them out. If something isn't working, we then pull it out with an extension, rework, and retest. So it's putting together that holistic pipeline of this. We're using action groups in our own code base. This is essentially cutting down test creation effort. That's just reusable function blocks of code so we can get testing up and running very quickly. We're doing suites. So what we're doing here is allowing Much finer control over the test environment setup. So this is with extensions where we have API credentials, different types of setups that all need done. We can wrap all that config work into testing frameworks so that we can say as we pull these extensions, we can also pull the type of configuration and setup needed for them with that extension, version with that extension, whether that's an individual extension version or a Magento 2.2, 2.3, different kind of configuration in the admin we have, and actually put that version with our tests so that when we take those down, we can get the full setup we need so we have reliable environments and know, well, if I deploy this environment, here is the front-end experience that's been tested alongside with it. And we're also, as well with that handling of the setup and teardowns, we're doing that via CLI. So Bin Magento is becoming a strong part of testing as well. So all those commands are available and we do very quick setup and teardown with those. Upcoming then, so we're doing some schema validation. That's just trying to make everything adhere to our rules. So we have some sort of technical guidelines and schemas that are enforceable. So we have predictable, repeatable test results. We're documenting that all in technical guidelines and extending the reporting. So that's available for local development. But actions like this around, say, extending the Allure reporting, where we're putting more information in it, we're breaking down the information in more granular ways. The end goal of that, as we'll see later in the deck, is that we want to return better and more information during the marketplace submission process. So that if you do make an effort and a commitment to delivering tests with your extension in the marketplace, that we will then give you as much feedback as possible, and that feedback and reporting and results will be as close as possible to your local development environment. And we'll work on exposing different things later in the deck that allow your test environments, your deployment environments to mirror what we're doing in marketplace, so that if you're getting failures, if you're getting passes, that's expected. The problem is surprises in that process. Where it works in your local, it fails in marketplace submission. That leads to rework, leads to resubmission times, leads to slow times to marketplace. So we're making these improvements so that they can come back to our extension developers. We're also improving WebDriver compatibility. That's just to support up-to-date browsers. We want to keep on track of that. Coverage, we're also concerned about. It's difficult for us to come out and tell everyone that we want to, enforce these practices with marketplace extensions if we aren't the golden standard internally. So there's been a lot of effort made internally. So some of that's just been us creating test regression suites that are usable by our community for development, for customization, for extensions. But also we've involved the community in porting old framework testing into the new framework. And that's partially as a learning experience for those who want to learn, but also it means we have direct on-the-ground feedback from people who are converting these tests into how the new framework operates. Does it work in their use cases? Is there problems with our assumptions around what environments are out there? It works very well in Apache, but Nginx requires further configuration. And as we take those learnings, we make the modifications necessary, be that technical or documentation, to ensure that we're covering as large a swath of the ecosystem as possible. That then allows us to have a full focus within Magento core development of producing all new functionality that is fully covered with functional tests, and it's very much a functional test first. The gate for each contribution in the core for, say, a 2.3 or a 2.4 feature is that it has MFTF coverage above and beyond unit or integration, so that we can put this forward as this is our bar of quality, this is what we see as a golden standard, this is what our definition of done and release-ready code looks like tested, and that can form both a basis and templates for everyone else to see our standard of quality. And when we start requiring marketplace to have that standard of quality as well and come in line with our own procedures, we already have that experience, knowledge, and examples out with Magento Core. We're also, just making everything as readable, usable as possible. But beyond that, we're also using the coding standards project. So that's something that's been put out as a community effort. There was I don't know who's been involved in that, anyone in this room, but it's actually a great project where we've taken something that was quite fragmented in terms of our coding standards that were applied between, PSR2, PSR4, EXTDN had quite a lot as well. And it was actually unclear for a lot of developers what coding standards would be applied, and particularly for submission to marketplace, what, if any, would be applied. So the first stage of that was, as a community project, taking that out, taking feedback and collaboration with the community to decide on what is our set of coding standards, what sniffs are we running, what kind of feedback do we want from them. Weighting everything by severity, so we can give not only feedback that, this has failed or this needs changed, but what the potential impact of that is as well. And then made that easy to use and available for everyone. So, easy integration with PHP Storm, good documentation on what we're testing and why. And then this collaborative effort has pushed out coding standards, which are now in place everywhere, available for everyone. And as we'll see later on, we're going to integrate those into our marketplace extension development as well. So that, again, another part of that submission flow and testing is now public and transparent. If there's a failure in the marketplace submission, you will know why, because you have those standards and those sniffs available locally to actually integrate into your CI/CD. So marketplace then, we're talking about how we're going to do these submissions and what we want from them, but essentially it all boils down to one thing. The largest complaints around marketplace and the biggest failure points around marketplace are essentially needing a bar for quality, needing to reduce submission time, so we get lack of rework, and the clearest and quickest path from submission to marketplace. And those two things occasionally are at odds. We need the quality in, but we haven't been entirely transparent about what that quality really consists of, what our full definition of done is. There's manual review, there's manual QA, and oftentimes extension developers can't know about issues because they don't know the exact criteria until it's come inside our system and we've given feedback back. So we're exposing some of this automated test tooling around MFTF, around coding standards, around a few other things, but we're also working to expose the actual environments that we're going to be using within that. And that's going to allow us, and this is along with documentation and guidance, is going to allow us to help extension developers to plug in essentially a local system that mirrors what we're doing for marketplace and being transparent about what that is, what the criteria are, what the checks are required, so that your submission process is going to be a pre-submission quality process, so that we can give the greatest confidence that by the time you reach submission, whether that's initial submission, whether that's a major version upgrade or just a patch upgrade, that you can locally, as you develop and as you get ready for submission, emulate our environments, our images, cloud, enterprise, community, and if you're going to support those in PHP versions, then we can expose those Docker images to you and allow you to test first in your own environments, so that you know, as we've mirrored marketplace environments, we can submit with confidence. That's going to reduce the amount of rework we do. That's going to reduce the amount of time it takes us to process those requests. And it's going to also ensure that we're going to end up on marketplace with extensions that are of high quality, not only, but also that are of a verifiable quality level. As those standards are exposed, it allows us to, not only us, but also our extension developers, to communicate to merchants, to SIs, well, when we say we're a high quality extension, this is the exact testing we've done. If you want to emulate that, if you want to take our extension down and test it in your deployment, we can supply exactly the tests that we have written for it and that Magento have run and approved in their environments, and that's now a value add that we can support as well. So, as I said, what we're going to do initially on that, this is in progress, not out quite yet beyond cloud, but we're working on taking the set of Docker images that we have and that we're going to be running through Marketplace and exposing those. So initially we're going to expose a community edition exact one with Magento, with PHP versioning in it as well. And then there's going to be tooling on top of that to build enterprise. If you have enterprise support, you can then build those images on top of it as well. The cloud image is already available, and we'll go into a couple of methods to get that. And we are going to recommend that everyone uses that on their local for their extension development, these Docker images, so that you understand what environment this is being run on, and there's very little of the will it work on my machine problem, which we get. And is understandable. If we don't expose those to you, it's very difficult to specify exactly what you should be running. That's the whole point of Docker. We use it internally. There's very little reason not to use it externally as well. So in terms of cloud then, so at the minute in Marketplace, we really want to be able to show that if you've done the work to be cloud compatible, that we can then expose that and show that on Marketplace. Now, of course, to do that for us to, and we don't have an exact definition of what that visually looks like right now, whether it's badging or it's sectioning off, this extension is also cloud compatible. But if our extension developers are willing to do the work to verify that things are cloud compatible and have done the work in their extension to do that, we want to be able to surface that as well. So we suggest that you can either request a dev license online, that gives you a cloud instance, or we will use the Docker cloud image. The one that's already available is the one that we are using. So right now, if you're looking at, well, are we cloud compatible? The tools already exist to check that. And in the future, as we roll this into Marketplace, we'll be able to identify that and show that in Marketplace that this extension claims cloud compatibility, and we have verified that in these environments. So it's immediately clear to a merchant or an SI that's using cloud that these are immediately applicable to them and have been tested and shown to be runnable in cloud in a verifiable, quality-driven way. We're also, those PHP coding standards, so we mentioned they're available publicly, those are getting rolled into Marketplace. So they're adopting that whole project. Currently, their submission criteria that they're suggesting is that they're only going to actually fail an extension on a severity 10 failure. So within those coding standards, everything is weighted by severity. There's 8s and 5s and 3s. 10 is obviously more serious, and we fail on that. Everything else is going to be, documentation for you, how you can improve your extension. So we don't want to put that out there as we're using our coding standards. Good code will fail coding standards sometimes, on lower severity. So we don't want to put the message out there that we're just going to fail everything on coding standards unless you have a clean slate, we won't accept it. But it gives a lot of information about what we're testing, why, and what kind of feedback we can give you as well. And we're going to push that same output of those testing back into Dev Portal during your submission so that you can see exactly what we've tested, what failed, what should be improved upon. And while we fail on a 10 severity, there will be information and quality rankings within Marketplace around, well, how much of it did you pass? How much testing did you do? And we'll get into exactly what that looks like as we close out the presentation. So this has been talked about a few times now, and unfortunately, we still don't have an exact date on this, but the work is underway. There's a lot of infra being put in place right now that isn't public yet, but the work is being done actively right now to make MFTF submission a part of Marketplace. And what that means is we will have a mechanism during Dev Portal submission where we can include MFTF testing with those tests. So initially, that's going to allow us to do a couple of things. So it's going to allow us to take your testing and run it in our environments. So what that immediately does is shows us the level of code coverage you have for those functional tests, what you're testing, which helps any manual processes identify what are the key and core components of your extension, and allows us to either pass it and know that